Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and this week the plan was to replace the brakes, but before I do that, let's get it so it's not going to catch fire every time I drive it, and do something about that dodgy fuel pump. Okay, so those of you who have been following along with this build would have seen that last week I went through and cleaned up all the engine bay, got it all looking great, and then the fuel pump started leaking, of course. It must have been the grot that was just holding it together. So in any case, I just went down to Supercheap and ordered a new fuel pump, which is apparently the correct unit for this car. Let's hope so, because apparently there's... basically the way this fuel pump works is there's a rod on a cam inside the engine that pushes up and down and just sort of pumps the bottom of this fuel pump. And there's a little lever in there. I'm not sure if you can see it, and it pumps the fuel pump. And apparently there's slightly different links in the lever so that if you get the wrong one, it doesn't work properly. So fingers crossed this is what I need. So let's get that one out, get this one in, and see if it works. All right, so if you have a look here, this little pin is actually sitting on a cam inside the engine, and this is the pin that actually pumps the pump. So I'll crank the engine over now so you can just sort of see how it actually works. So as I crank it, that pin you can see now that pin is traveling up and down. While I'm in here, I'm just going to pull this pin out and give it a quick coat of grease before I put it back in again, so it's nice and well lubricated in there. It can go back in the hole. And now I've got my gaskets, and they did mention that if I've got replacing a factory pump with the aftermarket one is to double the gaskets up. So I'm going to just give these a light coat of grease on either side. One of the big issues with these fuel pumps is they can cause problems when they have different length pins, and obviously if it's a bit longer, it's pushing further into the pump, it's going to give more pressure in the pump and overdrive the pump, and apparently things can break. It's not what you want, so you need to make sure that the pin is the correct length. Alright, so there I went in and I measured the top of the pin to the flange and then the gasket to the flange, and took the gasket height off of the pin height, and basically I've got a height of about 7.9 millimeters, and it says between 6.5 and 7 millimeters. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take that out, and I'm actually going to grind the top of that pin down a bit just to make sure it fits. You can order the right pin, and that's the way to do it properly, but I want to try and get it going now, and yeah, I'm impatient, so I'm going to give it a just sand the top down just a little bit, and hopefully that'll be good. We'll see how it goes. Okay, I've ground that down, and then I went back in with some wet and dry sandpaper and just sanded the top, got it nice and smooth and hopefully reasonably flat. So now I'm going to grease it up again, chuck it back in, and do my measurements again, and hopefully it's the right size now. Now I know lots of you are screaming at me, you don't grind these things, but I'm going to get it going and hopefully it works. I should really order the right one, and you can actually order full kits, I found out since, that come with the new, the correct size pin and all the rest of it, but I haven't, so let's grease this up, get it back in and see how we go. I'm just going to go back, I'm going to take a little bit more off. That's currently reading at about, that's about 7.2 millimeters. Alright, I've got that measurement down to about 6.9 millimeters, so I'm happy with that. It's within the specs that they're asking for. Hopefully I didn't mess it up and ruin it by doing that, but That's what it's saying on the pump I've got, so let's run with it. If I've wrecked it, then I'm going to have to get a new pin anyway. I probably should have done that, but I'm impatient. So let's finish greasing this up and get this on. Okay, the pin's all greased up and in, and the next step is to pack in here with a bit of grease, because that's where the pin rubs against all the time, and it doesn't actually get oil in there from what I gather, or probably very little, so not jam it with grease, but at least enough to keep it well lubricated. And hopefully that should just slip on. There we go. All right, now bolt it up, connect up the fuel lines and see if my dodginess has worked. Okay, now it's time for the moment of truth. Let's see if I've done it right, if it actually runs, and if it still leaks, and yeah, time to start it. Well, that runs great. It actually feels like it's running better than ever. So at least at this stage, I'm quite happy, and doesn't appear to be leaking. So now it's time to actually get on to what I was planning on doing today, which is replacing the brakes. So let's get into that. All right, got the wheel off. I've disconnected the speedo cable. I'll pull that out the back in a second. That just travels all the way through and locks into this hole in the end of the hub here. So obviously it's locked to the wheel and it spins, and that's how it sends the signal through. Next step is I'm just going to unbolt the caliper from the back. I'm not disconnecting the brake line. I'm just going to move the caliper out of the way, and then I can start tackling getting this disc off. Interesting thing to note is you can see here that this disc has got a lot of corrosion and pitting and stuff on it, and you can see it's not smooth and shiny, which is telling me that it's probably not doing a great deal. So definitely time to change these out and get it working properly. All right, that all came off reasonably easily. I just used an Oki strap to hold up the brake caliper, just so it's not putting all of its weight onto the brake line. And then just pried off the dust cap. That came off pretty easy. And then undo the Allen key on this little locking nut that goes on the end of the hub. Interestingly, this is a reverse thread, at least on this side. I assume the other side's probably going to be the other way around. I'm guessing just for wheel rotation, but good thing to notice. And then the disc came straight off. Let's give this a bit of a clean up, and then we can start putting it all back together. All right, I'm wedged down here in the back of the garage behind the booth, and I've got my my shop press here with the new brake disc set up, and I've actually put the bearings in the freezer, and they've been sitting in there while I had lunch. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the bearing races out of the freezer and then press them in one at a time to get them fit in. Putting them in the freezer helps sort of shrink them a bit so they fit in a bit better. So hopefully they'll go in without too much stress. All right, bearings are all pressed in. The races are in nice and neatly on both sides. So while I'm here, I might head inside and I'll just do the other disc while I'm at it so that I'm all ready to go when I get onto that side. Yep, those ones are in as well. A couple of little things I have learnt the hard way about putting the bearings in. The one on the outside, at least on the Volkswagen, I found it easier than trying to use a socket on it first. They cock really easily and get out of alignment. It was easier having a flat plate that I push the flat plate down to push it in and get it started. Yeah, you've just got to try and get them straight first. Once they're in a fair way, it's easier to keep them straight, but when you're starting, they cock everywhere and it's really a pain. So keep that in mind. Anyway, time to pack some bearings. Okay, now it's time for the messy part, and that is packing bearings. So they need to be completely solid with grease the whole way through. And I've got this bearing packer, so I'm going to give that a crack and see how well it goes. Alright, so I packed the centre of the hub with a reasonable amount of grease inside there. It's not rock solid, it's not solid grease all the way through, but there's a good amount of grease in there as well. So they're well greased up, bearings are in both sides, sort of juggle, hold them in and slide it on. So now I've just cleaned up the locking lug and it's time to put it back on again. So remembering it is a reverse thread. Alright, and from what I gathered, the trick with getting this to the right tension is if it's too loose, the hub will wobble. If it's too tight, it won't spin and keep spinning. So that's like a nice tension there. Whereas if I tighten it up a little bit more, see how it stops? It doesn't spin freely. So that's a little bit too tight. So just back it off a bit and that looks like it's just about right. Okay, so I'm happy with that, so I'm going to tighten that up and then I'm going to get stuck into changing brake pads. Yep, no, I'm an idiot. I've put it all on and I forgot to put the dust seal on, didn't I? On the back. So now I'm going to pull it off again, put the dust seal on, and then I can start doing some pads. All right, third time lucky. I also forgot that because I was put it back together again and realised, hang on, if there's a seal on the back, there's a seal on the front as well. Well, it's got a like a thick washer with a notch in it that goes over this groove here. So make sure you put that on and then bolt it up, get the tension right. Moving on. Make sure before we start compressing the brakes to take the cap off of the brake fluid reservoir. All right, so next thing is because the pads have worn down, the pistons are pushed out and you can't fit the new pads in there and still get them over the thickness of also a new disc. So we have to push the pistons back into their into the caliper itself. And the easiest way I've found to do that is with a G-clamp. Now it's time to replace the spring and the pin and bolt it up and start on the other side. And I just thought of that just then as I actually turned the front wheel around. I was working the whole time, tucking in the back, and I could have just turned the wheel. Made things so much easier. I'm not having a good day. Not sure how much was caught of that, but I just, the camera just dropped over again. And Canon makes some pretty tough cameras because there's a couple of little bits that are broke off, but it seems to still be working. So at this stage, I'm going to keep going. I'm really not having a great day. Well, that's one side done. Let's flip over now and see if we can do the other side. that all came off nicely, so hopefully I can put all this one back together much quicker than it came apart, and that means packing the bearings and remembering the seals, and I should be good. Let's take it for a spin and see if these brakes work. Okay. Yeah, it still feels like the front right is locking up first, so there might be a bit of air in the system, which is why the left-hand caliper was not grabbing like it should have. Tell you what, the brakes on this feel a lot better than that 911 I was driving last week, that's for sure. Well, I'm not exactly sure why it was so hard to start. That is a mystery, but in any case, the front brakes seem like they're good. I think I will need to go back and bleed the system again properly just to make sure everything's running right, but I'll do the rear brakes first. But I don't have any time to do that today because I spent half the day putting that fuel pump in. So that means it must be time for Fun Facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hey guys, in 1954, after an initial run of complete Volkswagen were brought into Australia, Lionel Spencer discovered that there were large tax concessions available for locally made cars. He proceeded to import CKDs, or completely knocked down packs, in order to get them assembled locally. The company Martin & King, a railway carriage manufacturer, was enlisted to assemble the cars. They soon realised that unlike the UK Riley and Wolseley bodies that they were used to assembling, which required a lot of fabrication and modification, these VW bodies were the most precise fit they had ever seen. Because the VW kits were so precise, they were able to fit together and assemble 5 cars a day.
Alright guys, that's it for another week. I didn't get to the rear brakes today because after half a day of stuffing around getting that fuel pump right and getting it all working, once it's running it seems to be okay, and it started fine the first time, so I don't know whether it's actually the fuel pump is the issue or what it is, but
it's never the machine, is it? It's the mechanic. Right.
Poor tradesman always blames his tool. Yes, it was a very messy day, but we have new brakes on the front and it is braking much better. If you want to help the channel out, head down to the link in the description, head to our store. You can get some of these cool hoodies. We're on opposite sides today. Mrs. Jeff's on the Datsun and I'm on the Porsche. Yep, pick up one of these in the store, and please like and subscribe to Homebuilt by Jeff, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the same place. See you guys.
Well, it's not written there. Initial run of completed Volkswagen, and they were enlisted. Oh my God. The UK and Riley, no. They soon realised that